this was my copy, and I wanted you to see it. I thought you'd love it. I interviewed the guy, the author, who, as you put it, is a groupie, like a Johnny Carson. Love Johnny Carson. Tell me your takeaway from the book.
So it starts, of course, and I love bringing up examples of things that Mike and I are too young to remember because they are few. When Carson started in October of 1962, you're 2 and I'm 5-ish, so we don't have any awareness of it. The whole Tonight Show experience would have been something that I'm going to guess similarly. We've never really talked about this. Was the Tonight Show your first sort of exposure to it? How do I get to be up this late watching what mom and dad are watching? Was there some year for which that was true for you?
Yeah, I kind of remember that. I remember it was a big deal for my mom and dad watching it at night. Sure.
And of course, I think we both grew up in Eastern time, so it was 11:30. So it was like, it was like forbidden zone.
And by the way, just a quick point of reference, in 62 when he started in New York City. He didn't start in LA. Yep. Go ahead.
And Steve Allen had been doing it, and I'll tell you, if there's anybody there is no Letterman without Steve Allen. I mean, just sort of stylistically, the found comedy, the bits, the things off the cuff is just it hurts me to talk about Letterman because he is now turned into Bad Santa. Have you seen this guy? He's just a political hack. It's awful. I loved that show so much in the 80s, but not to digress.
And by the way, but let's digress. Steve Allen inherited the show from Jack Parr, who apparently had a
Parr from Allen. Allen, Parr, Carson.
Oh, it was the other way around. Steve Allen originally in the Tonight Show.
54.
Then Jack Parr, and then Jack Parr had a nervous breakdown, right?
You talk about people wearing their emotions on their sleeve. He walked off the show because they censored a joke. Absolutely.
Why can't we do that? Why can't I storm off someday? I'm going to storm off the show one day.
Slam the book down.
Trouble is, they'll lock the door, change the locks, and take my card away.
1M every day. Don't do that. But as the 60s become the 70s, become the 80s until his farewell in 1992, it is a chronicle of American entertainment because as the show comes to its end in May of 1992, I will never forget watching those last 2 episodes, the finale, which was largely highlights, but the penultimate, the next to last with Robin Williams and Bette Midler, my heart it swells just looking at that moment of appreciation for the 30 years preceding. But if you go back to the 60s and the 70s, it's Rodney Dangerfield, it's Burt Reynolds, it's Jimmy Stewart, it's all these. It is a chronicle, it's a touchstone of all of American entertainment, brought to you by a man who was a perfect reflector for it. He didn't make you think anything. He helped you think. He didn't force ideas onto you. He didn't force his politics onto you. He was the ultimate welcoming host in the literal sense of the word, a host for an experience that was meant to entertain and enlighten and delight all Americans. He is a forever eternal American treasure.
And a very difficult, complicated man, hard to get to know. Mark Malkoff does a great job in the book of explaining that very few people really got into his inner circle. He had an inner circle, of course, but there weren't a lot. He was perceived as being kind of icy cold to people. I as a broadcaster my whole life, I always wanted to check off on my bucket list the ability to go to see The Tonight Show in Los Angeles with Johnny Carson in person. I wanted to be in the studio audience, and I got my wish one night. I got to go to L.A. and watch Carson do The Tonight Show.
And when was this?
This had to be, Mark, I can't even tell you. I'm going to guess late 80s. Well, I don't even remember that. It was something to do with work. If he left in 92, it had to, I'm going to guess it was maybe 90, 91. And I just remember it like it was yesterday. Let me tell you why. I can't tell you who the guests were. I can't tell you what the topics were. All I wanted to do was watch Carson because for me, he was so brilliant and such a great communicator and such a force. And I was a kid that always wanted to be a broadcaster. Always wanted to be a talk show host. Mm-hmm. So I studied him. I watched him. First of all, what's kind of fascinating about these late night shows, when you're in the studio audience and you get marched in like baby veal about an hour before the show, and you're sitting there, and the studio was frigid. It was like legendarily air conditioned and cold.
How far ahead of time? How far ahead of time?
About an hour. About an hour. You go in an hour before, and they tape like at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, LA time. It's not live or anything. They pre-tape these shows, and I think they still pretty much do that across the board. So I'm in that studio, shivering, waiting, and it was just dead as a doornail. And a minute or two before airtime, they all get into place. The band is in place. Doc Severinsen came out, and it was like watching a factory worker show up to do his assembly line job with a lunch pail, because Doc Severinsen just went through the motions. He was just very businesslike. Ed McMahon walked over the microphone. He was very businesslike.
Does he, because there was a period at least, and did this happen the night you were there? Does Ed do a couple of minutes of warm up?
Yeah, they did a little bit. No, Ed didn't do the warm up. There was somebody else, like a producer, who did a little bit of a warm up. Ed came over though and went to the microphone. But here's what's crazy. It was so dead and boring, and I thought, oh my gosh, there's no energy here. And then they did the 5, 4, 3, 2, what? When that theme song started, da 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 da, everybody lit up. All of a sudden, Doc Severinsen is beaming and smiling, and Ed is laughing. Now, 30 seconds before, they were all grim-faced. They were just going to work. The whole thing is a shtick. I mean, they were performers, and it all lit up, and the band played, and those rainbow-colored curtains parted, and out came Johnny Carson. Now, unlike David Letterman, because I saw them do Letterman a couple times too in New York. Did you know that it was kind of cool, kind of interesting? Letterman did the warm-up with his audience before he came out. So in other words, when you saw Letterman come striding onto the stage, that wasn't the first time the studio audience saw him. He came out first and he did 10, 15 minutes with the audience. Then they would do the countdown, and right as they were counting down, he goes backstage and then walks back out again when the show starts, and they say, here's David Letterman. But not him again. Yeah, it was kind of interesting, but not with Carson. With Carson, that's the first time you saw him, and I just studied him. I wanted to watch him and see what he did, and all the legendary stories are true. During every commercial break, the lights would go down like about half on the set. He didn't engage with the guest at all.
Did he disappear at times to smoke a cigarette? Because the book indicates that he was constantly smoking.
No, he didn't. You couldn't see him smoking when I went. I think he stopped in later years. In the early days, I think he actually smoked on camera, maybe. But no, he sat there. He sat there, and all he did was look out into space and tap the pencil. And the guest was sitting right, and that was apparently legendary for him. Now, it was later, it had been explained, and I think that Mark gets into it in the book. It's like he didn't want to talk to the guest on the break because he didn't want to take away any of the dialogue they might have on camera.
Because there'd be some golden moment, some golden exchange, and he'd go, dang, I wish this was when we were on the air. So in order to reduce the chance of that to zero. And this is also the very weird time because people watching modern shows now, to whatever degree that anybody does, the guest comes on, the guest leaves. The guest comes on, the guest leaves. In the old era of the Carson show, you'd have Dom DeLuise, Don Rickles, Jimmy Stewart, right, and Betty Davis. And it was sometimes the show was an hour and a half. The guest would come on, and then they would just slide down the couch. So eventually they would all be on the couch. And there are these legendary episodes where you've got Dean Martin and George Gobel and Bob Hope, and they're all there, and they're all like a moderate blood alcohol level. And it's some of the most amazing comedy in television history.
And drama. Shelley Winters once dumped a pitcher of water on Oliver Reed's head. She was on the set, and she was down the couch, and Oliver Reed, the famous British actor, he was bagging on women's livers. He was bagging on feminists, and that just offended Shelley Winters, who was a big lefty. She was a big women's liber. So he was like talking about women need to be providing for their man, working in the kitchen and all that. She got so mad, she went over and took a thing of water and dumped it on his head and stormed off the show. So, but that was that drama and that tension and that dynamic when people were staying on the set. But back to the fact that Carson would never talk to guests on the break. He was defended that way by saying, well, he didn't want to take away the magic. A lot of people said, nah, he was just a stone cold jerk, didn't like to talk to people because he was antisocial.
I don't believe that for a minute. I think and this may be the weirdest thing. Almost all the books visit on this. How in the world could this be true of somebody with this job? I think there was a shyness to him.
Yeah.
Not everybody is as gregarious and get out there and glad hand all the time.
You know who was like that? You know who was like that? Who's very shy in person and not like that on air? You knew him well. You subbed for him. You filled in for him nationwide.
Rush.
Rush Limbaugh was very shy in person, almost to a point of kind of awkward. He was not a gregarious, like small talker, and
get out there and work a room and
no, that wasn't him.
Connection with 500 people, not everybody.
That wasn't Rush, and which is interesting because I always thought it was fascinating how Rush really was very different in person from his on-air persona. And I would say of you and of me, the truth is, what we are on the air is kind of what you get. There's
ain't no secrets here, baby. There's not
a whole lot of showmanship. Now, I don't say that to detract from Rush or criticize him because, frankly,
no.
if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be sitting here today. I mean, this is the guy that paved the way for stations all over the country to continue to thrive with talk radio. But he was very, very different in person, decidedly different in person than he was on air. And, of course, everybody knew the bluster and the braggadocio stuff was all a shtick. He wasn't like that. But what a great book. Love Johnny Carson. And I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Mark.
For full shows, live and on demand, it's Salem News Channel.